Here's the big question. Why did Jesus have to go down to hell after he died on the cross? In fact, while his loved ones were watching him on the cross, their only wish was for his suffering to end and for him to go straight to heaven. But that's not what happened. For 3 days, he seemed to disappear. No one knew where he was. From the dark day of his death to the bright day of his resurrection, a big question surrounds everyone. What did Jesus do in hell for 3 days? Only a few people know this, but the answer is actually hidden in the Bible itself. It has mysterious clues. Listen carefully. The keys of hell, imprisoned spirits, and the very kingdom of death. But what does this really mean? Before Jesus died, he already gave a hint about what would happen. The Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The phrase, heart of the earth, is a mystery, but Apostle Paul clarified it. Before Jesus was resurrected, he first descended to the lowest parts of the earth. When you combine these two statements, a clear truth emerges. After his death, Jesus didn't immediately ascend to the Father, but descended to a purposeful place. And yes, he is connected to a specific one with a purpose. And there is a very important verse that gives a clue. Christ preached to the imprisoned spirits. The phrase spirits in prison tells us who was there and why Jesus went to that place. But if you think he went there to free these spirits, that's not what happened. In fact, the real reason is even more amazing. To understand this, we first need to go back to the perspective of the Jews in ancient times. But before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us content creators a lot. Thank you very much, and now back to the video. The place called the heart of the earth had a name before. In ancient Hebrew, it was called Sheol. In the New Testament, written in Greek, it was called Hades. But it's important to clarify this. When the Bible mentions Sheol or Hades, it doesn't always refer to the fiery hell and eternal punishment that we think of today. In Jewish tradition, Sheol is the general dwelling place of the dead. Almost all souls, whether good or bad, go there. Almost everyone goes there to wait for the final judgment. According to other Jewish traditions, Sheol is divided into 2 parts. A place of comfort for the righteous, sometimes called the bosom of Abraham, an old term for a temporary paradise, and a place of torment for the unrepentant. And this is where we understand who the spirits in prison are. They are not demons. They are not fallen angels either. They are souls who died before Christ came, people waiting, imprisoned in the realm of death and unable to leave. So when Jesus died, his spirit descended to Hades, in a place full of souls waiting for answers and justice. And according to Apostle Peter, Jesus preached to them. His going there was not to suffer again. It was not a punishment either. It was a mission, but not just any mission. Jesus' descent into Hades was not a simple visit. It was like an invasion into enemy territory, a place guarded by someone very strong and ready to fight him. According to the book of Hebrews, that guard was Satan. The verse says that through his death he destroyed the power of the one who holds the power of death, the devil. This means that Satan doesn't just have control over the temptations in a person's life, he also has power over people's fate after they die. He is the one who holds the realm of death and can keep souls imprisoned there. Once you enter that kingdom, no one can free themselves on their own. So when Jesus descended into Hades, he faced his greatest enemy right in his own stronghold. It was a direct battle. And this is where the very important revelation from the book of Revelation comes in. It was the resurrected Jesus himself who declared, "I died, but now I am alive forevermore, and I hold the keys of death and of Hades." In that culture, the key was a symbol of complete authority. If you held the key to a kingdom, to all its doors, you alone could open and close them. If before it was Satan who held the power of death, and now Jesus holds the keys, this only means that an encounter took place during those 3 days. Jesus' descent into Hades was not peaceful. It was war. It was an assault to seize the power that the devil had held for so long. But many ask, how did Satan get that power, and why did Jesus have to take it back? To answer this, we need to go back to the very first story in the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve disobeyed, sin entered the world. And the Bible clearly says the wages of sin is death. Because Satan was the first to tempt, he also became the one who held the power of death. In other words, he is a warden who holds the prison of souls. But Jesus is different. He did not sin. And because there was no sin in him, death could not hold him. But to defeat death, he first had to enter it. The only way to enter that territory is by dying. This is exactly what he said. I lay down my life so that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me. I lay it down of my own accord. Death can imprison sinners, but not Jesus, because he is completely pure. So when he entered Hades, he entered as a conqueror, not as a captive. As Apostle Paul said, "O death, where is your sting?" The sting of death is sin. But God gave us victory through Christ. And there's another very important detail. The Bible calls Jesus the first fruits of the resurrection. That means he was the very first to defeat death. And he is the guarantee that everyone who believes in him will also overcome it. During those 3 days, he preached to the waiting spirits. He took the key of death. He set free the righteous who had long been resting in Sheol. And after that, it seemed like the story was over. But it wasn't. Even though Satana was defeated in the most important battle, he did not give up. He no longer had power over eternal death, but he still had the ability to deceive, destroy, and cause chaos in the world. And his first attack happened on the very morning of Jesus' resurrection. When Sunday morning came, Jesus' body was no longer in the tomb. His soul, which had descended to Hades, had returned victorious. Satan no longer had the power to hold him, so all the enemy had left was lies. According to the Gospel of Matthew, because the religious leaders were desperate, they paid the soldiers who guarded the tomb. They ordered them to spread the story that Jesus' disciples stole his body at night. The plan was simple. If people don't believe in the true and physical resurrection, it's as if his victory over death is meaningless. What he did in Hades would remain a secret, just a story with no evidence. But lies weren't Satan's only response. Along with it was intense anger. In the book of Revelation, Satan is described as a great dragon who, since he could no longer destroy Christ, poured out all his fury on the followers of Jesus. The dragon was enraged and went off to make war against those who keep God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And this is where what happened in the following years and centuries comes in: the severe persecution of the apostles and the early church. It could no longer be used as a lifelong prison for the believers. So he used it as a weapon to threaten their lives, to force them to renounce their faith. His former defense turned into a vengeful attack against people who now have the promise of eternal life, the very promise he lost as the guardian of death. So Jesus' victory in Hades did not immediately bring a peaceful world. On the contrary, this became the beginning of a new kind of war, a war for faith, for truth, and for the perseverance of the believers. According to the Bible, this battle will continue until the day of judgment, when Satan himself will be judged and his defeat will be complete and everlasting. But there is another immediate effect of Jesus' victory over hell that is often forgotten. At the very moment of his death, some of the dead came to life and came out of the tombs near Jerusalem. Matthew confirmed this. The tombs were opened and many bodies of the saints who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and entered the holy city, and many people saw them. This shows that Jesus' descent into the realm of death is not just a nice symbol or opinion. It is a central part of the Christian faith. That is why the truth that he descended below was even included in one of the oldest and most highly respected statements of faith, the Apostles' Creed. The Apostles' Creed is not a book of the Bible. It is a brief summary of the core beliefs of the early Christians. It was formed in Rome around the 2nd century, a time very close to the lives of the apostles in the early church. Before a person could be baptized, he had to declare these lines out loud as proof of true faith. It has two purposes: to clarify what the essentials of the Christian faith are in a brief and direct way, to protect the church against false teachings at that time which claimed that Jesus was not truly human, that he did not really suffer and die. And here's another interesting detail about its name. It was called the Apostles' Creed, not because it was literally written by the apostles all at the same time. Its name comes from an old, very famous legend. According to an old legend, each of the 12 apostles supposedly contributed one line to complete the creed before they parted ways and preached in different parts of the world. We know now that this isn't historically accurate, but the name remained, because it represents the teachings that were passed down by the apostles. To this day, millions of Christians pray this creed, and in the middle of this brief summary of the whole story of salvation, a clear line appears about what Jesus did after he died. Jesus was crucified, died, and was buried. He descended into hell, and on the 3rd day he rose again. But here's the important detail. The line "descended into hell" was not included in the earliest version of the creed. It was only added in the 4th century when more people started asking if Jesus really held the keys of Hades. It was included to remove any doubt that Jesus really descended into the realm of death and triumphed there. But it's not just the Apostles' Creed that shows this belief. There are other ancient texts that state it more directly and boldly. One of the most important of these is the Athanasian Creed. This creed is different. It's not just a simple summary. It's like a short theology book, a clear, detailed, and strong explanation of Christian beliefs. It's named after St. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, who became the main defender of the true divinity of Christ against a dangerous teaching at that time called Arianism. Arianism is an old teaching that says Jesus was just a created being and not truly God like the Father. Athanasius dedicated his life to defending that Christ is both truly God and truly man, making the creed named after him so important. It clarified teachings on the Trinity and the dual nature of Jesus as both fully God and fully man at the same time. And the creed clearly states that he suffered for our salvation, descended into hell, and on the 3rd day rose again from the dead. But there is another ancient story that describes Jesus' descent into Hades in an even more dramatic way. This is the Gospel of Nicodemus. It's an apocryphal text, not part of the Bible, but it was very influential throughout the Middle Ages. The second part of the book doesn't just say that Jesus descended. It depicts how, in a way that's almost like a movie, it shows here that a very powerful light suddenly burst in the midst of the darkness of the kingdom of death. Satan and all of Hades panicked at its power. It was described that the voice of Jesus was like thunder as he commanded the gates to open. And when they did not obey, he broke them down. In the story, he tied up Satan and then reached out his hand to Adam, the very first person to be lifted out of the darkness. Following Adam was a very long line of patriarchs who had been waiting for a long time. Abraham, Moses, David, the prophets, and all the righteous of the Old Testament who were in Abraham's bosom. Abraham's bosom. A part of Hades in Jewish tradition, a place of comfort. It was for the righteous before Christ came. This comes from the very parable of Jesus about the rich man and Lazarus the beggar. According to the parable, when Lazarus died, he was carried by the angels to Abraham's side, a place of comfort and rest. Meanwhile, the rich man ended up in a place of torment, and the parable says that there is a great chasm between them. a barrier that is impossible to cross. In that place, in Abraham's bosom, everyone is safe and at peace. But even though they are at rest, they are not yet in heaven. They are still waiting. In that waiting place, nothing is new, and there are no strangers. All the great figures from Israel's history are there. Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, King David, Prophet Isaiah, John the Baptist, and all the prophets and holy people who died with faith in God's promise. They lived and died with hope, but the last door to heaven is still closed. So they waited, some for hundreds of years, for the coming of the Messiah, the Savior who would bring them out from the kingdom of death. But there was an event on the cross that seemed to contradict all of this. This is one of the things often used by some scholars to question whether Jesus really descended to Hades. On the day Jesus was crucified, one of the two thieves beside him repented before he died. And Jesus gave him a very important promise. Truly I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise. And this is where the big question comes in. If Jesus' soul went down to Hades after he died, how could he be with the thief in paradise on the same day? The key lies in the meaning of the word paradise for the Jews at that time. For them, the word paradise could also refer to Abraham's bosom, the peaceful and blessed part of Hades, where the righteous rested. This is the paradise that the Jews spoke of at that time, not heaven, but the place of rest for the blessed dead. Therefore, Jesus' promise was true that on that very day their souls would meet in the part of Hades reserved for the righteous, because that is exactly where Jesus would go before he conquered Hades. There is another intriguing detail. In the oldest Greek manuscripts, there were no commas or any punctuation. These were only added by translators many centuries later. That's why some scholars say the line can also be read like this: Truly I say today, you will be with me in paradise. In this reading, the word today refers to the time of the promise, not the time of its fulfillment. Even though this is not the most widely accepted interpretation, it shows how a small detail can open up a new way of understanding. But one thing is clear: the victory of Jesus in Hades and his resurrection became the turning point of everything. At the moment he held the keys, Jesus became the promise, Lord of the kingdom of death. And when you hold the keys, you have the power. You can open or close the cells whenever you want. This is exactly what Jesus did to free the righteous who were waiting. But this needs to be clarified. It doesn't mean that he destroyed the entire prison or that the power changed, but the structure of death and Hades as spiritual concepts continued to exist even after the resurrection. According to the Bible, the final destruction of death is reserved for the end times. In the book of Revelation, the scene is very clear. This is what is called the Great White Throne Judgment, the final judgment for all of humanity. All who have died, great and small from every era, will stand before God's throne. And here, death and Hades will play their final role. According to the text, the sea gave up the dead that were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead that were in them. And each person was judged according to his deeds. At this moment, they are no longer jailers. They no longer have the power to hide even a single soul. They will be forced to give up everyone because their duty is finished. And after they have surrendered the last soul they held, it is time for them to be judged. This is the dramatic picture given by the Revelation. And death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. This is where the story ends. Even death itself will disappear. Thrown into the second death, a state separated from God forever. In the new heaven and new earth that God promised, death will no longer exist. These are the three stages of Jesus' victory. First, he removed the sting of death, which is sin, on the cross. Second, he took the keys, the authority over Hades. Third, at the final judgment, even the very concept of death will be completely erased. The victory will be complete. The plan is finished. But there's another question. Are humans the only prisoners underground? according to the Bible, no. There are beings there who are older and more powerful than humans, and they are mentioned directly in the writings of the New Testament, such as Jude and 2 Peter. They are the angels who abandoned their duties and left the place where they were supposed to dwell. According to the text, God kept them in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. And in 2 Peter, it's even more detailed. God cast those angels down to the lowest depths. He chained them in a dark prison while they await judgment. They are not human souls. They are angels who rebelled in ancient times, even longer ago than human history. And unlike Abraham's bosom, they are not waiting in a place of peace. They are imprisoned, already being punished while waiting for the final judgment. So when Jesus descended into Hades, it wasn't only Abraham's bosom that was illuminated by his light. He carried an authority felt even in the prisons of the fallen angels. Yet he did not descend to grant forgiveness. That was impossible. Their sentence had long been set. What he brought was a message that was even more painful for them, that their leader, Satan himself, had already been defeated. There are even ancient prophecies that seem to refer to this event. For the early Christians, they saw this as a direct fulfillment of the prophecies in the Old Testament. The most important of these is Psalm 16. King David said, "You will not abandon me to the realm of the dead, and you will not let your Holy One see decay." After many centuries, on the very day of Pentecost, Apostle Peter used this in the first sermon in the history of the church. His point was clear. Since David died and was buried, the prophecy clearly wasn't about him. As a prophet, David was speaking about the coming Messiah. This means that the soul of the Messiah would not be left imprisoned in Hades, and his body would not decay because he would rise again. And according to Peter, Jesus is the only one who fulfilled this. His very resurrection proved that he was the one David was referring to. There's an even stronger description. In Paul's letter to the Colossians, he used bold military language. This is how he explained Christ's victory. He captured the powers and authorities, stripped them of their weapons, and exposed them to public shame before all creation. The powers and authorities are ranks of the demonic army, the very forces of Satan himself. The word Paul used, disarmed, literally means to take away weapons and armor, like stripping a soldier of his armor after being defeated in battle. And not only that, he made them a public spectacle. This is the image of a Roman triumph, where the victorious general walks through the center of Rome, displaying the defeated enemies for everyone to see. It's as if Paul is saying, this is also what Jesus did. He finished it, he shamed them, and he showed all of creation that the kingdom of darkness has been defeated. And after he triumphed and took the keys, he took the next step. He set the captives free. In Ephesians, Paul described this using another song. When he ascended on high, he led the captives in his triumph. But even though the story is clear, there have still been many reflections over the centuries. Different traditions interpret it differently. The most well-known are the Catholic and Orthodox Contra-Reformation churches. For the Catholic and Orthodox, Jesus' descent into Hades is literal and powerful. He did not descend to suffer, that was finished on the cross. He descended as a conqueror, a light in the darkness. But for many Protestant theologians, they interpret this differently. For them, the line descended into hell in the Apostles' Creed is not a literal journey of Jesus beneath the earth. They see this as a profound metaphor. It's a way of describing the depth of suffering and the weight of sin that he bore on the cross. In their view, the real hell that Jesus experienced was not a place, but the moment when he bore the sins of all humanity and felt the seeming distance of God the Father, a pain of the soul that is even more agonizing than any physical torture. According to this view, the complete victory occurred on the cross itself, even before the 3 days. And this issue extended beyond books. It became the center of the most important celebration for Christians, the Easter Vigil, the night before the resurrection. The day between Good Friday and Easter Sunday is called Holy Saturday. In the liturgy, this is a day of deep silence. The church is silent, there is no music, everyone is waiting. Because while the body of Jesus lies in the tomb, his spirit is carrying out a mysterious mission in the realm of death. This is the day when it seems the king enters the enemy's fortress to free the captives. In the tradition of the Orthodox Church, this is one of the most beautiful parts. On Good Friday and Holy Saturday, very ancient and deeply mysterious hymns are sung. The storytelling is like a drama. Hades, who is depicted as the guardian of death, roars in fear when he sees the light entering his kingdom. The one he thought he had devoured turned out to be the creator of life, who came to destroy his throne. This is the poetic version of the assault on hell. Believers have sung this for thousands of years. And even though different traditions have different explanations, the core belief remains unchanged. The death of Jesus was not a quiet ending. It was the beginning of a tremendous victory. From the ancient creed to the hymns sung today, Christians continue to believe in this. What does it mean for us today? It's not just about the ancient story of keys, angels, and kingdoms. It has a direct effect on how we view death. Yes, the empty tomb was found on Easter morning. That wasn't the beginning of the victory. That was the manifestation of the victory that happened in the depths of the spiritual world while no one was watching. How does God work even when we can't see it? This is also how Jesus did it. And because of this, the meaning of death changed for those who believe. If Jesus holds the keys of death and Hades, it means death is no longer an enemy. It's just a passageway. It's no longer a frightening wall. It is now a hallway leading to the next life, straight into the presence of Christ. And because Jesus descended into the depths, the walls that blocked us were shattered. It became possible for people to have direct connection with God. Many people say that their perspective changed when they understood these 3 days. They no longer see burial as a sad farewell. Instead, we will meet again. Because now paradise, the place of God's presence, is open. It is now the home of all who died in faith. It's open because Christ went ahead and opened the way. In the end, Jesus' descent into the depths shows the depth of God's love. He didn't just die for us. He even went down to the darkest part, where no one could be saved except him. If you like this part, get ready. This is just the beginning of the whole story about Satan and death. Even though he has already lost, he still moves around in the world, and God allowed him. But why? You'll find out in the next video. Click the thumbnail to discover the next secret.